The May 6, 2024 Auburn City Council workshop will be called to order. The first item of business is Lewiston Falls FERC license comments by Mr. Cousin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council. Our last communication on this was on, I believe it was March 24th as a communications item. We've been engaged in the licensing process for coming up on 2 years now for this facility. It starts out with a proposed study plan. We commented at that step, requested additional studies. Some of those studies have been completed, most of them have been. And at this stage, they've filed a draft license application. Brookfield, the owner of the hydro facility, has filed the draft license application and looking for feedback on that draft license application by late this month. We have been meeting with a group of stakeholders. Those stakeholders include non-governmental organizations, Appalachian Mountain Club, Trout Unlimited, Grow LA's River Working Group, City of Lewiston as government agency, and we've also had participation from other federal and state agencies that are involved in the licensing process that can't necessarily sign on to a set of comments that are shared by the two cities, but they've been very helpful in helping us navigate the process and what's normal, what does FERC consider related to project operations, and help us shape those comments even though they'll file their own separately. That also, part of why we're doing this, it's almost a month before the, not a month, sorry, almost 3 weeks before comments are due, but part of what we wanted to do is try to finalize those so we can share those with the other agencies that'll be commenting, and I think there's a lot of overlap that they can have in their comments with the comments of the two cities. But the two cities have a lot of weight in this process as the host communities. There are two licensing processes that were contemplated for this one. We are using the traditional licensing process, which is an older process that existed with FERC. We had advocated in the beginning for them to use the integrated licensing process, which involves FERC staff much sooner in the process than the traditional process. This process really to date does not formally involve FERC until they file their final license application, and that's when FERC starts having their own public scoping meetings and involvement in the process. It was criticized as maybe not as open to use the process that Brookfield ultimately convinced FERC they were able to use, but I think it's also been beneficial in the sense that we've been able to see the studies that are completed. We've been able to have a lot of discussions with Brookfield and still pull FERC in for discussions that they can have now that they can't have after the license application is filed. So I wanted to briefly go over the set of comments that we have proposed, take any feedback. These have been vetted by that group. They do not include comments that are specific to Lewiston, but they include comments that are shared by both cities, like the aesthetic flows over the falls. There is a significant reduction in the amount of days per year that we have water over the falls because they're directing it through the turbines. So we've been leaning on that to, and it's not uncommon in other places to have a license requirement that Brookfield direct water over the falls during certain periods of time for aesthetic purposes. And we've done an aesthetic flow study with Brookfield and the stakeholders. Dam 1 and Dam 3 are the best for the biggest visual impact with a flow that is achievable in a lot of the year. So what we're proposing is that we ask for Dam 1 for at least 40 days per year between May 15 and October 30th. Allow for flows of up to 4,000 CFS minimum to provide that aesthetic flow. We're also asking for evening flows on Friday evening, 4 to 8 p.m. And of those 40 days, at least 10 of those would be scheduled coordinated days with Brookfield that would fall on a weekend when we have an event, a day when we have an event in the downtown on the weekend, just so the exposure is to more people on those days and more people get to experience that aesthetic of water over the falls. We were disappointed in the draft license application, although it's not unusual at all. I think it's more often than not, they don't put more than they think they have to into the draft. But we were disappointed to see that they really are not proposing any new recreational facilities as far as the draft license application, so we're pushing back on that. And we've listed some upgrades that we see as related to project operations and providing access to the river. One of which is the North River Road boat launch is in rough shape. I guess it's gravel, there's some erosion issues. It's could really be improved to be more accessible to pedestrians as well as to anyone with limited mobility. There's no ADA accessible access to the river at that location, and it's flat enough that there really could be. So we're looking for Brookfield to be required to or to commit to doing that. The dam does obviously creates an impoundment, and it creates a safety area above the dam where you can't have boats close to the top of the dam. So it really, while there was already a portage at the falls, with the natural falls there, it really extends that. So there's a much longer distance that you would need to portage in order to do a through paddle and get around the falls and continue. So what we're asking for is for the license holder to participate at 50% in design and construction costs to complete a portage that would tie into our river walk, ideally under the railroad bridge, although we don't have the rights to do that yet. We have secured rights as part of a project approval to a significant portion of that riverfront above the railroad bridge. Brookfield owns some other ones, and we've had verbal commitments from a couple of business owners that would allow us to connect that back out to Center Street. We need to formalize those, but what we're looking for here is for Brookfield either to commit to 50% of design and construction costs and participate in the design process when we secure the rights entirely along that corridor. And if they don't commit to that, we would try to have FERC require that of them as part of the licensing process. Above and below Dresser Rip, so if you picture going out 136 near Delecto Farm, there's a set of rapids there. Those rapids really hamper our emergency responses to be able to access the river by boat, either south of the Lown Peace Bridge to the top of those falls, or again to access them after the falls when you can't just take a boat through the falls, whether you're going up or down. So we're looking for Brookfield to be either to offer or to be required to provide a portage, access points above and below that would serve emergency needs but also be available for the public. Those rapids are attractive to some whitewater paddling groups for recreational use as well, and those access points could serve both purposes. During certain times of year, they're attractive enough that we think we could have some whitewater events at that location if we had good access. River safety signage is something that Brookfield's already talked to our public safety folks about. I don't see that there's any sticking point with doing that, but we're looking to make sure that it gets done as part of this license. And what that would do is create markers along the river that I guess the public for recreation, but primarily for public safety could reference. So if there's someone or something in the river that they're trying to rescue, then having those reference points to say it's past marker 5, we just passed marker 7. Those help with the emergency response, and we don't expect any real opposition to that. Brookfield's been open to that. They just haven't been done to date. A lot of licenses require that the licensee maintain their project recreation and emergency facilities. In the 80s, the cities of Lewiston and Auburn, I think, agreed to a deal in the licensing process that was less than ideal for maintenance. Brookfield does have obligations to make capital improvements over a certain size over time if we can justify that they're needed. But on the Auburn side, as well as the Lewiston side, I believe, the cities are really providing the day-to-day maintenance and not the capital expenses associated with West Pitch Park, the boat launches, all of those project-required recreational facilities. So what we're looking for is for Brookfield to be required to maintain those. And oftentimes what that results in is an agreement with the municipality where Brookfield pays the municipality to maintain those if that's something that the community prefers to do as part of normal Parks and Rec. But it covers those expenses that are required as maintaining those project facilities. Just prior to the license application, about a year prior, I think, to the application, Brookfield took about 5 miles of river out of their project area. They petitioned FERC for that. They said it was unnecessary and unrelated to project operations. Both cities, as well as a number of other stakeholders, opposed that, but FERC approved it. We are partly making the point that there are impacts outside of the current project area that Brookfield should be responsible for mitigating, but also asking that the project area be extended to include more of the river the way that it did before, because the project operations do impact river flows and recreation beyond the current project boundary. So I think that's sort of two-part. One is just to make the point that we still disagree with the reduced project boundary. We think Brookfield can argue that they can get out of some responsibilities because of it, that they might have otherwise been required, but also two, to make it clear that there are recreational emergency needs outside of the project area that we think Brookfield should be responsible for. There is an emergency access boat launch at Festival Plaza. I don't know if you've noticed out back, but it still has signage that warns people not to launch boats there. It's been a popular spot for launching boats, and we'd like to see that designation changed as part of this to be both recreational and emergency access. I don't think that that'll be a heavy lift as part of the process, but it's one of the things we're asking for. And lastly, there's a website called Safe Waters that a lot of boaters and fishermen or recreational users rely on at other hydro facilities that allow us to see what the flows are on a given day. Maybe you're traveling from a half hour or an hour away to do something on the river. You can see what the flows are. And we're also asking for some ability to the best of their ability, and they do model the river pretty accurately, knowing what the flows will be and planning for storage of water, to be able to kind of plan ahead a half to a full week ahead of time to say, we expect the flows to be in this range that the rec studies identify as good for these uses, kind of a thing. So people can plan on day trips to the river. That's the gist of it. Welcome any feedback, and we can make any changes before we submit later this month.
Questions by the council? Council Platt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I do have this. It's great. I appreciate kind of the breadth of perspective on these comments and suggestions. My question is, what authority do we as a city have to enforce these covenants? What if they don't do? What types of things do they not get if they don't do these?
Yeah, so I liken it to we as the city are like a resident at the planning board meeting. So we can advocate for these things at this point. FERC will listen to them. We have to show that there's a nexus to the project operations, that Brookfield's operation of the dam in some way creates a limitation or a need for something like this to make the river more like it would be without their use of the river for private profit and power generation. FERC is required now to look at all of these uses, so fisheries, water quality, recreation, with equal weight to power generation as part of the process. So they have a set of standards that they'll use in making those decisions. We directly don't have any authority, but I think this is our chance to make sure that FERC understands the impacts that we see the facility having on the river and on the community, and advocate for those. And then FERC has the authority to require them if Brookfield doesn't agree to them with their license application. And then there's also, we've seen in some other licensing processes where one of these items that does have a strong nexus to project operations might not be as important to the community as one that doesn't have a strong nexus. And if FERC requires one of these that benefits a particular community, that community could negotiate something else in exchange for that. Maybe the flows are required 40 days a year, but that costs them $10,000 a day. And we agree to 20 instead of 40, and they can help with a recreation project or something like that.
Other questions? Council Walker?
Thank you. Thank you. I remember years ago when West Pitch was built, we had a deal set up with, I don't think it was Brookfield then, but they used to, when we put a plan together to do something, they normally would come forward with some money to help us, or they would have some money set aside. You're saying now they don't have any of that for that area?
Yeah, so if we can demonstrate I know for West Pitch and for North River Road Boat Launch, if we demonstrate that there's a need for a capital improvement, we can petition them to come in, and if it is needed and we justify that it's needed, they are on the hook for capital improvements, but not regular maintenance. What we're proposing is that they would still be required to provide those capital improvements, but that they would also provide for ongoing maintenance.
For the city of Auburn, we definitely need to go after them to help us with the boat launch, and because that's a disaster after a rainstorm.
It's in tough shape right
Yeah.
now, and it gets heavily used not only by boaters on weekends and holidays, but a really heavy use for like a lunchtime crowd just stopping at the river and eating food that they picked up somewhere along Center Street, presumably.
Yeah, also, down here next to the river where we have what we call a emergency boat launch, definitely, I don't know if that's our problem, their problem, but for us to really say that that's an emergency to go in and go out of is really a step overboard, because the only thing you can get in there is a small boat. And because of the way we allowed the parking down in there, number one, and the entrance to that boat launch is way to the left coming off Main Street. Trying to come in from behind Roadblock would be a disaster for a big fire truck, that's for sure. So I would stress that we come up with a lot better plan on how getting safety equipment into that river, because it would take us 10 minutes to get someone down there to back a boat up, if you can even back it up. If it was an early afternoon, you probably wouldn't back one up, because the parking down there is unbelievable at times. So that's, and I've seen that over the years many times, saying that that's a nice area to put a safety boat in, but it's a trick and a half to be able to do it.
So some work with public safety to design improvements to make it more accessible.
Other questions from the council?
Yeah, well-written letter. I really appreciate how you've you've emphasized the change in the industry and the change in the need and the importance of the aesthetics of the falls for our economic development. And I think if you can enhance and emphasize that even more, great. But I think that's an important piece in context as we're going into a new phase in licenses, that our cities have transitioned, and so that's a growing need for what we're aiming to do on both sides of the river. To that end, I noticed at the end of the letter you had others with a question mark, wondering if you were interested in potentially others that might sign on. I'm wondering if some organization related to economic development might be willing to review and co-sign with you all, as just an emphasis of the importance there.
Any other
Yeah.
questions?
And we'll be sure to share it with other agencies now that we're getting close to a final draft, and the Land Trust has used some of it in the past. And we can try to think of any other economic development agency.
Council Walker?
I'm asking that, how long is this license, or when will the next one come due?
Yeah, so these are, we only have one person on our committee that was part of the previous license. And they're 30 to 50 years. This one will probably be around 40 years.
And they're transferable?
They are.
Meaning if Brookfield sells to someone else, they just assume the same license terms?
Yes, Central Maine Power acquired this license, and it's been through NextEra and now Brookfield as well.
Any other questions? Not, thank you very much,
Thank
Mr.
you.
President. Our next agenda item is a Public Works update from Mr. Holland.
Give me just a second, I gotta find the presentation. There it is. Slideshow from beginning. All right, good evening, Mayor and Councilors. Here in front of you, just to give a quick update about what's happening at Public Works, and I can assure you it's a lot this time of year. First slide, this is just our hardworking men and women of Public Works. Just a quick recap on winter operations. I know I gave a brief update when we were here for the budget presentation. At that time, we were only at 32 inches of snow, and the storm on the 23rd and 24th of March and the April 4th and 5th gave us another 28 inches. That, just put that into perspective, it brought us to 60 inches for the year. Out of that, it also added 2 more parking bans. And it messed up a lot of things because every time we bring out the street sweepers, it seems to snow, and that's exactly what happened, and it put us behind the 8 ball on that. So we had swept some of the main arterials at that point, and ended up having to go back and getting some of it. So storm recovery, just wanted to talk about that a little bit. Obviously, these were pictures of last summer. Obviously, from June on, it seemed like every other month we were getting a storm that did some damage and stuff. Preferably the 12-18 storm that we got, which did damage, and we were able to get some FEMA reimbursement. We are working with FEMA right now on that. We are at a point where we're meeting with them weekly and about to start some of the repairs. We've hired some contractors that are going to come in and help us with some of those, just because with all the other tasks that we have. Just some of them are we had a catch basin fail on Riverside Drive. That will be done by a contractor soon. We had fence damage, we had pavement damage, we had brick damage all on the Riverwalk, which we are working with contractors. We've had to get quotes. It's been a lengthy process trying to get all that. And we've got, let me see, this section of North River Road that we need to fix, which we'll be doing that in-house. But in total, there'll be about $150,000 plus in reimbursement for some of that damage that happened on that 12-18 storm. All right, street sweeping. So we're back at that. We've made really good progress. The weather has cooperated. Obviously, for us to start street sweeping, we start out with a 3rd shift sweep, and the weather has to be conducive for that. Obviously, we run water to keep the temperature keep the dust down, and temperatures have to be, appropriate for that. So we wait until we can run that 3rd shift, and at the same time, we're running the 1st shift. We run 16 hours a day for that week, and then we switch to 1st shift for a couple weeks until we can go where we can sweep on 2nd shift as well. So we've been running the street sweeper 16 hours a day. We have a hand crew that's primarily on 1st. They do a little bit on that 3rd shift sweep just to get out, because we do around downtown and in the alley and all places where it's easy to do it at night. They keep ahead enough so we do not, everything is out on the curb for us to be able to do that for 16 hours a day. We do that until all of the sidewalk areas are pulled in, and then that crew will go on to other things such as lawn damage, which if we'd have stayed on track before the snowstorms, we would have had that done. Now the grass is growing, so we're always a little bit behind on that, but we are starting that. I think we're starting some of it this week. And we'll be continuing on. There are several work orders on lawn damage. And obviously due to the winter, the ground just doesn't freeze anymore, and it's almost impossible not to have some of that. And pothole patching's another one, and whatever else might come in at this point. So, pothole patching. This is just putting things into perspective. This picture that is up here is just picture 10 of our big trucks that haul 16 ton apiece. That's 10 loads. We've put out 162 ton of patch since October, all by hand through our patch heaters. So the freeze-thaw cycle this winter has been brutal, and some of these potholes just keep coming back, and we keep going out and patching them. Center Street, we had to actually, at one point, April 1st, they started making hot top. We went out and we actually dug down, because there was a couple places it was all the way to gravel, and we actually dug it all out and repaved it back in. Then we had a contractor fix the one in front of Kentucky Fried Chicken, because that was right around the snowstorm time, and we were just up against it. So, and that's not counting that material that we put in there. And since April 1st, we've put out 30 ton of hot top through the patch heaters, and those obviously are more permanent repair. I like to bring up the potholes because there's a lot of people that call and say the hotel road out by the airport, it was, you know, those are considered delamination holes. They're only usually the first layer, they're not tire poppers, and coal patch does not stay in them. When we switch to hot top, we use a tack. If you see when pavement goes down, they have a tank truck that sprays the road. It makes the two pavements bond together. We can't use that in the wintertime because it has to be of temperature. And if it's on a truck that's cold, it's just, you can't use it, it's too thick. So when we switch to hot top, we start using the tack, and all these roads, including the delamination holes, will be filled. We go plow run by plow run. That's how we do it. We start, obviously that's still going to some of these that are tire poppers that we have to, that come up. But we do try to get through. There's 20 plow runs, so it takes a while for us to get through all of those roads to get every delamination hole, every pothole filled. Our brush collection, we started that 1 week ago, and we started on the outside, north and south, outside of the city, and are working our way in. We have a pulp truck on either side. We have ours and a hired contractor, and we also are using chip crews where people have piled it in the wrong spot. The pulp truck can't get in there because of low power lines or whatever. I can tell you that obviously on the outside of town, there's probably a lot more brush out there than there is in town. But the two plow runs that we were on, we didn't finish it in a week. So that's probably going to be 5 or 6 weeks, maybe even 7 weeks of getting all that brush picked up. That's with the pile at Public Works, which we've had to work a couple Saturdays to actually haul that off because people are just bringing it. It's coming from everywhere, and that pile's never been as big as it is. So we have to try to keep up with that as well. Prior years, it's been not too bad because if we do get a rain day, obviously we work on hauling that off, and we've been able to keep up with it. This year, it's a little extraordinary. So. And like I said, as we get into town, I see, getting a little faster because obviously there's not so many piles here or there. And it's not just the pulp trucks either. We have a trailer dump that goes on our tractor trailer that lots of times we'll send out that with our truck, and the pulp truck is picking it up off the ground and placing it in the back of that. So while he's gone to dump, we're still loading the pulp truck. So we're trying to make it as efficient as possible. And of course, our tree crew is still trying to maintain as well. Obviously, we took the pulp truck away from that operation, but they're still doing engineering projects. So if engineering has a road where we need to, they need some trees cut in order to make that construction happen, they're trying to work on those. Obviously, we pull, if we have sick calls or whatever, or people on vacation, we'll pull them guys to help with the brush collection. And obviously the usual workload. And just with storm damage alone, there's still stuff up in the air that we have to get. So there are several work orders for that as well. Our Asset Essentials, which is our work order system for facilities, for everything for us, fleet. So far total, and that is with the fleet work orders, we've had 6,254 work orders. The Citizen Portal is live. We kind of put that out there softly to make sure all the bugs are going to be worked out of it. But so far, since we implemented it, which was right around the last budget presentation, we've had 27 people put citizen requests in. and everything seems to be working great with it. They can go on to the report it feature. They can go down how to set up an account, and once they have an account set up, it's set up. So if they have other things that they need to get in, it isn't as bad as trying to go in the first time. And they're able to attach pictures to it, which is a big help, and all of that. So it's been working really well. This is just a screenshot. Obviously, Auburn is big, and it's hard to get it all on one slide right here. So it's a screenshot of the north and the south. I would have liked to, take it out a little bit so you could actually see, so they're not all grouped together. But those little dots are all work orders. So when we put a work order in, an address with it, it pings the spot. So all of those spots are either open work orders. Some of them are closed because we've completed it, or they're in progress. So as you can see, the 6,200 and so many work orders that I mentioned, those are all plotted on a map, and this is what it looks like. So we do try to get creative, and we use any help that we can possibly get. We just had a week during April vacation where we have the alternative sentencing crew come in. I can tell you on the weekend it was like 60 to 70, and we hit spots. Fortunately it was during vacation, so we were able to do all the spring cleanup at the schools. So the maintenance guys from the school that are under us as well worked with that group, and we got all the lawn repair done, the raking, all of that done at all the schools. We also worked at Municipal Beach. That had not been cleaned up from the winter, any down sticks, raking, whatever it may have been. We put the crew in there that following Monday, and they were able to help us get that opened up. We did some Lake Auburn Community Center. We did some work with the winter being the way it was. We were able to get in there and take the old foundation out of the building that was next to the road. So there was a lot of loam work, seed and hay. There was a group of 20 guys that went up there and loamed all of that for us, working with a couple of our guys. Obviously, Public Works lawn damage, that's one of the last places that gets fixed because we're always out helping residents, so they were able to help us with some of that. And again, it had a rainy day, so they used them in the schools, helping do some cleaning in an area. So really, really big help for us. All week long, it was 25 guys, and again, on the weekends, it was 60 to 70. The Conservation Working Group, they're a great group that work with us. They're a big help. They did Earth Day cleanup in several areas and helped us clean a lot of trash. And we have the Community Service Day coming up where Edward Little gives us roughly 100 kids in different groups. And we've got projects all planned in different parks and painting and all kinds of stuff planned for that. So that's another creative solution that we use. Again, the pollinator garden's on here, but I'll talk about that in a couple slides here. The season ahead, obviously Memorial Day is a big thing for us to get moving. Flags have been ordered. They'll be delivered this week, all of the cemetery flags and the street flags. Flag holders will be available. Those are the little markers that say U.S. Veteran on them. We put them out several years ago, and we always buy a few because there are either some that get missed or they get broken, or veterans are added to the cemeteries. And we always put it out there that if somebody feels they're missing one, then Liz will be sending out a post about being able to go to Central Fire on the weekends, because obviously Public Works is not open, and they'll have markers there that they can grab. They can always call us and we'll get one to them or place it for them, or they can come to Public Works during the week and pick one up. So there will be a post going out about that very soon. Anybody that feels that they're missing one. I would like to emphasize, though, we've had a couple calls in the past years when we've done this, and there is at least one private cemetery that I know of in Auburn, and obviously the rules for placing stuff in there goes under them, so that is not us, and that's the only calls that I think I remember receiving was that, and I couldn't do anything about it. So the flag placement is also with the American Legion, so once we get those flags, I meet up with those guys. They have a certain number of cemeteries they do, and then we, APW, have some, and then at the end, APW checks them all to make sure they're all done. But the American Legion is a big help for us as well in placing all the flags. And we always take, if somebody's interested in volunteering or wanting to do it the day that we do it, we'll make sure that gets put out to everybody, and we gladly take some volunteers to help with that. We started this last year, the No Mow May, and there was a post that was sent out. There was immediate response back, I bet, within, I don't know, probably a few hours of 50 people wanting signs. And now we're up, we limited it 100, but Liz told me today that she's pretty sure we're very close to that 100. The signs will be in. Our crew goes out and delivers them to each resident that asks for it, may even place them in some cases. We obviously assist with all of that. So those should be in the end of the week, and they'll be out. Obviously, it takes time to get everything nowadays, so those will be out by the end of the week, hopefully. I mentioned the pollinator garden. The Conservation Working Group had met with us a while ago and really wanted a pollinator garden to show. And obviously, the No Mow May helps with that, but they want a specific one. So we decided in that group that Pettingill would be the best place for it. It's highly visible, and the volunteers, there's a couple that live really close to it. It would have been really easy for them to be able to work on it and help maintain it. So we're going to be meeting towards the end of the week for that as well and picking a location, but you will see a pollinator garden. And again, that will be put out so everybody knows it's there. So citywide cleanup and beautification, every year it starts with sweeping season, obviously, and part of that sweeping is our MS4, which we have to do, but obviously it makes the streets look good when everything can be cleaned up. And again, we've gotten a lot of the areas downtown already, and just riding around today, it makes a big difference. Obviously, planting flowers, we've had 2,000 plus flowers. That's not going to change. If not, they usually always add a few more. The hanging baskets on all the poles on Main Street into New Auburn. We obviously do the bark mulch in the beds and the seasonal banners that we have that say the City of Auburn on them. All those will be going up very soon. And the citywide blitz is going to take care of a lot of that. When we're at a point where we can pull the guys in, we're going to pull every available crew for 1 week, and we're going to go around and try to hit all of these areas and try to make sure that everything is good to go. Operations manager and a supervisor just went to every park, every cemetery, and every green space and came up with a list of all the stuff that needs to be done. So we're going to be hitting those spots and hopefully making all of that beautiful before Memorial is the plan. And again, we know the grass is growing. We have hired contractors to do our cemetery mowing and green spaces. They're all under contract with us, and they're just waiting for us to tell them to mow. We sometimes, depending on the year, can wait until Memorial Day, but with the grass growing the way it is, we're probably going to have them mow one time before Memorial and then again around Memorial. So the mowing should start very soon. Some of the other beautification things that we're doing is we are going to be, we're working with the communications department, and obviously the dedication of the 2 Pettingill fields is coming up. We're going to be designing some signs that are just like what's in the Anniversary Park, very similar to those. Those are going to be put in along with some other beautification efforts around where the sign is going to go for Joseph Walker and Tricia Aslan Memorial Fields, and then Philbrook Corner is going to be one, which is right out here. And Mustang Alley is another one, which is out behind Norway Savings Bank. There'll be some street banners and a sign going there as well. Our staffing, we seem to be stabilized a bit except for the area of mechanics. We do have a hopeful for one of the positions, but right now we are currently down 2 mechanic positions, and we are currently down 1 operator position. But for the most part, it's kind of leveled out, just hoping to get the mechanics back in there. And we are trying to use a creative recruitment effort, such as an intern program. We do have 1 intern that's been working out with us. Our goal is to hopefully be able to offer him a full-time job once he's done school. It's worked out very well for us, and he's been a very good help. He's had a mix of everything. He's been in the sidewalk tractor, and he will have his class either B or A when he's done school. So it's working out really well for us, and we're hoping that we can continue that. And that leads me into this. Obviously, we are Maine's only accredited agency, and having that designation helps us to receive things like this. We were selected for the 2023 Best Stormwater Idea in New England. They call it the Stormy Award. They give away 3. We were selected for our program efficiency and technology category. Woodard and Curran, our current stormwater people that help us with all of that, have put us in for it. They've been here, they see what we do. They were like, we feel you could really win that award with your leaf cleanup. We bought a leaf vacuum several years ago, and obviously leaf litter clogs our drains for one. It's aesthetically not pleasing, especially when they clog up and they've washed down a street or out into a main street or whatever. And also with our MS4 permit, and I see this coming later on, it puts a nutrient load into the waterways. So in the end, it creates phosphorus. And this is a way of keeping that stuff out of the waterways. So with our leaf vacuum and our street sweepers, which the street sweepers sometimes, back in the past, our street sweepers, the technology of those has improved. Lots of times street sweepers would go out, yeah, they'd clean up a few leaves, but it would just kind of drag them down the road. Well, our 2 street sweepers, our recent street sweepers that we bought, and are able to open the door more and allow the conveyor to feed the hopper more with a lot of leaves. So we're able to clean up leaves better with street sweepers. So with a combination of that and our leaf vacuum, we picked up, calculated 916 cubic yards of leaves last fall. And again, we're up against times then too, because lots of times the leaves fall and winter can be right on the next door, the next step, and it's hard for us sometimes to get them all. We'd like to do a lot more, and if we're allowed to do that, we will. There's a lot more new technology since we bought that leaf vacuum, and I know we're always looking at areas where we can improve efficiency without having to use man hours. And they've come out with new leaf vacuums now that you can have one guy sit on it and not have to be out there manhandling the big vacuum hose. You can do it all from a joystick, and someday we'll probably be looking at that to improve our efficiency. And that concludes what I have. Is there any questions?
Any questions from the council? Council Walker.
Yeah, thank you. I guess one of my questions is, a lot of people pick up leaves now that you've talked about it, and they bag them, and of course they bag them in black bags. Mm-hmm. In most cases, we don't pick them up.
Correct. So most homeowners can put 10 bags a week up into their household trash, and Pine Tree Waste picks them up and takes them. That's how they can get rid of them. They can do 10 bags a week.
Okay, if that's true, and I believe what you're saying, how do we get that information out, especially when it's this time of the year when everybody is picking them up? I see them all along the roads in different places. I'm sure them people don't know that 10 bags or whatever it amounts to can be picked up.
That is something that we can put out in a post and try to advertise it, Leroy, and make sure we get it out, Councilor Walker. So.
Very good. You can call me Leroy, though.
Okay.
Councilor Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is, with the weather the way it's been so wonky, and the roads have been chewed up, and we all got all these potholes, are you going to be way over budget with having to buy all this extra material to fill the holes? Or should we start planning now to get you some more money somewhere?
I think it's based on what we do during the summer, Councilor Gary, and when we do construction work and all of that money comes out of the same account. I think this year we're going to be okay, because I don't think we did as much paving work, tearing up driveways and stuff like that last summer, because we were working on playgrounds and things like that. So I think this year we'll be okay, but that's definitely something that we need to watch for the future, because the way the winters are, they're just getting worse and worse.
I can't believe how chewed up a lot of roads have been, just wear and tear and all these snowstorms, and how the ground didn't freeze solid and it was soft all the time.
Yeah, it's very tough, and a lot of them, like I said, like out here, it's very rough, but there's really no good way to just patch it. It needs to be ground up and fixed, and, you know, we do our best to fill the deeper holes, to try to make it smooth. And we do have a couple areas that are bad that we're probably gonna cut out and try to repair, to try to prevent next year from being as bad.
Councilor Milks?
Yeah, like particularly in front of the Hannaford, I'm assuming that's one of them that you're gonna be looking at.
Yes, I
I know
believe
that-
so, yes,
yeah.
they're,
Because that's.
They're everywhere,
That's the
so-
moon.
yep, yep.
Councilor Walker?
Center Street, isn't that a state road?
That is a state aid road, so we maintain it, and every once in a while, from what I understand from engineering, the state throws some money at it because it is a high collector road. And this year, that is the road that they are planning to go out sometime this summer and be repaved this summer. So hopefully that's gonna help us tremendously on that.
So you're saying the state is gonna help us to do that?
The state is, yes.
That, at some point, it turns into a state road, when you start getting out of town.
Correct, up by the lake, it turns into a state road. Yep.
Other questions? No, thank you very much, Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. So thanks for the time tonight to hear that presentation. I probably, in the last 2 weeks, have probably received at least a dozen or more emails from all of you regarding the work that Public Works is doing. If you're hearing it from constituents, then we know that others are hearing or concerned about this. And so we thought sharing that, what the workload is, what they're doing, why they're doing it the way they are, that would be beneficial. So thanks for the time tonight for that.
Sure.
You purchased a new hot box, I guess is what you call it, for asphalt. Now, way back when Dan had said that hot box was gonna make a big difference, can you explain to me, where and how does that hot box make a big difference?
How does it make a big difference? Well, cold patch is hard to put out when it is really cold in the winter. Cold patch can be heated just like regular hot top. It just doesn't get heated as hot because you burn the goodness out of it. So we do put cold patch in there. We load it with a skid steer every day we go out, and we keep it at 100 degrees. And it allows us to shovel it easier. You can imagine when you put it in the back of a truck on a cold day, it's just rock hard, and the guys, you know, they're hurting themselves trying to get it out, or whatever, and there's a chance for injury. So by using this truck, it keeps it warm, and then we're able to go, like, when hot top plants first opened, it was Topsom where we were going to get it. And it was a necessity because obviously patch wasn't staying. So by going that far away, we're able to keep it hot, 300 degrees, just like we're supposed to. And that's what's helping. We have a trailer one that goes on a truck, and we have one mounted to a truck. So that both of those are going all the time. So that is, it keeps it warm for us and makes it easier to use.
Any other questions?
I do want to just make a quick update. Like Phil said, he's been getting calls. The brush, people have been calling saying, have they forgot us? I promise we have not forgot anybody. Again, if it's a brush pile that's under a power line and we have to go back, we may have to go back with a chipper and get it. But the truck may be in the area, but it's just because they can't pick it up. We will get every pile. It's just going to take us some time.
We could probably do this all night. One last thing, though, as Scott had mentioned about the brush pile. Council Walker did mention at the last meeting regarding the brush pile next to the what we would call the cold storage building up at Graceland Road. So we did have Auburn Fire Department go out and do an assessment of that pile based on fire concerns. We have a good recommendation from them on what to do with that. Obviously, the first choice is find another location. We will continue to work to do that. They did give recommendations for Scott on maintaining that pile. Currently, as it sits, and they did the full measurement of how much was in there on a full capacity. It's not a fire threat at this point because of the conditions. That's one thing that we'll continue to monitor. It is now on the radar for fire to keep that in mind and communicate with us if the season temperatures shift, what we need to do with that. But Council Walker did mention that. I want to make sure that we followed up on that. And so PW has that information. We'll work closely with fire on it.
I hope at some point it goes down enough so we can just keep up with it. That's the plan. So
Thank you very much.
you're very welcome.
The next agenda item is an executive session, a legal matter pursuant to 1 MRSA subsection 405-6E. Is there a motion to go into executive session?
Motion to move in.
Second.
Moved by Counselor Walker, who is the second. All those in favor? Opposed? We'll be in will be called to order. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our first item tonight is the consent agenda. There is a number of appointments on here. I understand there may be requests from the council to remove one or more. Are there requests to remove items from the consent agenda?
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
I make a motion that we move consent items 65-0506 2024 and 66-0506 2024 to new business.
So we'll handle these in singular motions. So the motion by Councilor Wisner is to remove Order 65-0506 2024. Does not require, just a request will remove it, doesn't require a vote of the council. And the second request is which order number?
66-0506.
Item 14.
Item 13 and 14?
Yeah. Yes. Correct.
Okay, so the second request is to remove Order 66-0506 2024. Both of those items will be removed from the consent agenda and will be handled under new business.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I request that we move order 670506 2024, that's item 15. Move that to the, off the consent, please.
Councilor Milks has requested Order 67-0506 2024 be removed from the consent agenda, and it will be taken up under new business. Are there any other requests by the council related to the consent agenda? If not, for the public, there's a number of appointments on the consent agenda tonight. Upon recommendation of the school department, Huda Aiden and Anya Eggy to serve as city council student representatives. Upon nomination of the appointment committee, Emmanuel Babin, Katie Boss, Michael Dixon, Joe Gray, Chelsea Eaton, and Gerald Sampson to serve on the zoning board of appeals. Upon nomination of the appointment committee, Elizabeth Collier and Mary LaFontaine to serve on the Board of Assessment Review. Upon nomination of the appointment committee, Corey Kinnan and Elizabeth Collier to serve on the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, and confirming Chief Moen's appointment of Anne Marie Idarola as a constable with firearms. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Councilor Walker has moved the consent agenda as written, accepting items 13, 14, and 15. It was seconded by Councilor Geary. All the vote will be by show of hands. All in favor? Opposed? 7 having voted in the affirmative and none in the negative. The motion is adopted. Next order of business is the approval of the April 16th, 2024 regular city council meeting minutes. Are there any errors or corrections? Seeing none, is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Moved by Councilor Walker to approve the minutes as
Second.
written. Seconded by Councilor Cowan. Vote will be by show of hands. All in favor? Opposed? 7 having voted in the affirmative and none in the negative. The motion is adopted. The next item of business is communications and presentations. We'll have a presentation tonight on child abuse and neglect data presented by Community Concepts, Inc., Melissa Wakefield from Maine Families Program Manager, and Melissa Robinson from the Prevention Council, and the Community Coordinator for Androscoggin County will make the presentation.
Hi, I would like to first of all thank you for allowing us to come here and introduce to you the county data review and child maltreatment trends that we have in Androscoggin County. This is the 2022 reports that we will be reviewing with you today. My name is Melissa Robinson. I'm the Community Coordinator on the Prevention Council of Child Abuse and Neglect for Androscoggin County. I work for Community Concepts. The Prevention Council that we have not only covers Androscoggin County, but we also cover Oxford County as well. But for today's purpose, we will be just reviewing the Androscoggin County data. This is my colleague, Melissa Wakefield, and she is the program manager of our Maine Families program over at Community Concepts. So looking at what we're going to review today, the overview of the child maltreatment data is the number of victims of substantiated and indicated child abuse and neglect that was found in Androscoggin County in 2022. We're going to look at the overall counts and the rates by types of abuse, risk factors identified at the assessment, by age of child, and by gender and age of abuser. We're also going to take a look at the substance-exposed infant notifications made to the Office of Children and Family Services over at Department of Health and Human Services. And this actual data right here is brought to you from the Office of Child Family Services, and the other resources included as well are from them.
So as Melissa indicated, the data comes from the Office of Child and...
Hers is on.
Oh, hers is on.
Yeah, just
Sorry,
might need to
thank
bring
you.
it a little closer.
So the data comes from the Office of Child and Family Services, and all of the data reports, the raw data, as well as additional data can be accessed online. If you go to the DHHS website, go to OCFS, data reports, and then initiatives, and there's multiple places where you can request data, and you can see everything you would like to see about this. So before we get into today's presentation, I'd like to share a few terms with you. I'd also like to invite you to take care of yourself during this presentation, as it's difficult to hear some of this information. We're going to be talking about substantiated and indicated child abuse and neglect that occurs in our state and in our county. Substantiated abuse means severe abuse, and indicated abuse is low to moderate cases, but I think we can all agree that any type of abuse a child incurs is horrific. Maine categorizes abuse in 4 different areas. We have physical, emotional, sexual abuse, and then we have neglect. As Melissa indicated, this is from the calendar year 2022. We often get the data halfway through the next year, so we're anticipating the 2023 data coming out soon. So we're going to jump right into the numbers. We had about 4,000 children, just under that, in the state of Maine that were victims of abuse and neglect in the calendar year of 2022 statewide. These are unique victims, so it's one child is counted once, regardless of the amount of abuse or neglect that they incurred. They only get counted once in the data report. This is a trend line over the last 10 years for the statewide statistics. You can see that we've had a decline over the last few years and over the last 10 years in general. Androscoggin County, let me see, the population data is from 2020 because we didn't have any current data for the population county level data. So we estimate that there's about 23,000 children under the age of 18 in Androscoggin County. For the statewide data that we did have census data that gave us for 2022. So there is a bit of a discrepancy when we're using statewide data and then county level data. So in Androscoggin County for 2022, we saw 411 children who were victims of child abuse and neglect. We took a little bit of a deeper look. OCFS looked at those 411 victims and decided to look and see if they had been prior victims of abuse and neglect at any point. And they identified that there were 169, or 41% of those children had had cases in the past. Here is our Androscoggin County trend line. You'll see that we also have decreased over the last 10 years. but our decline over the last year is just a little less than the statewide. When we look at the numbers statewide by county, you'll see that Androscoggin County has the 4th highest number of children who are victims in our state. This graph shows you the rate per 1,000 children. This graph looks a little better for Androscoggin County. However, we are above the statewide average of 16 children per 1,000, and we're sitting at 18 per 1,000. The rate in the state has declined over the last couple of years. It was at 18 and it's declined to 16. Androscoggin County has maintained at 18 from last year. What you don't see here is the national rate of child abuse and neglect. The national rate of child abuse and neglect is 8. So next we're going to look at risk factors. You'll see here we have a list of risk factors, and the top 3 are the 4 types of abuse. You have neglect, physical abuse, emotional or psychological abuse. We take a look at the next ones, which indicate the risk factors that were present that contributed to those abuse types. So for Androscoggin County, we see that caregivers' drug use, domestic violence, and alcohol use are the primary risk factors that are happening. We invite you to think about what the root causes might be to these risk factors. What gaps do we have in our community, and what gaps do we have for services for families and children? And what sort of prevention programming do we have available in our community? So now we're going to take a look at the types of abuse and the number of victims for the types of abuse. Here's your statewide graph. This shows the 4 types of abuse and then neglect. So neglect is primarily the type of abuse that children experience in our state, followed by emotional abuse, physical abuse, and then sexual abuse. For Androscoggin County, the graph is very similar. We also have neglect as our top abuse. However, there's a bit of a shift. We have physical abuse as our second top, and then it's emotional abuse and sexual abuse. It should be noted that physical abuse is the only type of abuse that saw an increase. So I also invite you to think about what you're concerned about. Which type of abuse are you concerned about? I'm concerned about all of them, but is there one that stands out for you? Is there a number of victims that you're worried about? What type of prevention services do we have in place, and what type of prevention services do we need? So next we're going to look at the age of the children. I'll pass it over to Melissa.
All right. So here on this following graph, this shows the number of victims of substantiated or indicated abuse by the victim's age at the time of referral. So as we see here, babies, children under 1 year of age, were our highest rate of victims of child abuse and maltreatment at 439. You could see here that our second highest number of children is at age 8. What I would like to note here when we look at this next graph, which still shows those same numbers, however, what I would like to point out is that age 0 since 2019 stayed consistently our highest number of child maltreatment in between 0 to 1 year of age. Our age groups last year, in 2021 when we did our assessment, ages 8 and 9 were our second largest number. And again, what you could see here is 9 is still our highest number for 2022. Also, I would like to point out that our highest increase was in our age 10, even though it does look slightly less than age 8. That was our highest increase from last year to this year. So what I would like to invite you to think about is what gaps and protective factors are we seeing among parents and other caregivers of children in these age groups that may be contributing to this issue? What age groups of children would you be most concerned about after seeing these numbers? And what prevention services are already being offered to target these groups, or what services are not being offered?
So we have one slide about the abuser. What we can share with you is that emotional, physical, and sexual abuse, the perpetrator is most often a male, and for neglect, it's most often a female. You'll see that some of the numbers don't quite add up to the 411, and it's because a caregiver can perpetrate multiple different types of abuse, so it's based on that. The last data that we would like to share with you is about substance-exposed infants. Substance-exposed infants were previously called substance-exposed newborns, and there is a notification that medical professionals are required to do when an infant may be affected by illegal substance abuse, when that infant is demonstrating symptoms resulting from prenatal substance exposure, whether it's illegal or legal, or when the infant is diagnosed with fetal alcohol spectrum disorders. That is different than a mandated report. So there's a substance-exposed infant notification that goes in. If the provider is concerned about abuse and neglect potentially occurring, they also have to make a mandated report. For Androscoggin County, we saw 153 substance-exposed infants in 2022. This is a slight decline from 168 last year. And if you hold just a moment here. Don't want to misspeak. So we saw a decline in Androscoggin County, but we also saw a decline statewide. So we were at a height of 900 in the year 2020 notifications. In 2021, we declined to 808. And in 2022, we are down to 695 statewide. So again, we ask, what services do we have for families? What services do we have for our children? Where are the gaps? What we would like to see?
So throughout this presentation, we did mention the word protective factors. Here at Community Concepts, we offer professional trainings. We also offer parent enrichment classes to help build protective factors within the community. We feel that, and also the Center of Study of Social Policy feels that when protective factors are present and built upon within the community and within families, it helps build stronger families and stronger communities, then we'll see less child abuse and neglect. And the 5 protective factors that we speak of are helping build concrete supports within families and communities and making those resources accessible and letting parents know what resources they have available. Building parental resilience, letting parents know that they're not in this alone, that they have resources and places that they can turn to in times of need. Building children's social connections, so getting out into the community, letting parents know what resources there are out there for them to get more involved. As we know, when there's community built, people feel more connected. Social emotional competence of children, so letting parents know and building the communities up to understand that, you know, the social connections and that children can make will only help build stronger individuals as they grow, right? And also the knowledge of parenting and child development. So the more that families know and understand their children's milestones, the easier parenting will be. So again, what we would like to think about is how can we build these protective factors within our communities and make sure that parents are making these connections, and how can we help each other out as a community?
So the summary of our findings is that we are seeing decreasing rates of child abuse and neglect both statewide and in our county. However, Androscoggin County's rate is higher than the statewide average. SEI notifications, substance-exposed infants, is also decreasing. Neglect, physical abuse, emotional or psychological abuse were risk factors, but remember that is followed by caretakers' drug use, domestic violence, and then alcohol use. Neglect is the most common type of abuse that we find statewide and in our county. The ages 0 to 1, for the children at that age, were most likely to be victims. However, we are concerned about that little bump in the middle, that 8 to 10-year-old range. the gender of the abusers. More victims of neglect had female abusers. More victims of emotional, physical, and sexual abuse had male abusers. You'll see in your packet for this evening, you have our flyers on the Front Porch Project, as well as the Protective Factors training. These are trainings that we offer free to the community and to any provider. The Front Porch Project is aimed at inviting the community to help raise children, help support one another, help parents, and then also to give them guidance when they're seeing something that is beyond support and help. Where do they go and what do they do? And Melissa already spoke of the protective factors. So we'd like to thank you for your time this evening and invite any questions.
Questions from the council? Council Collins?
Thank you so much for that presentation, really important data. I'm curious how we align with other states or national rates. Neglect, is that the highest, is that a common trend, that the hierarchy of the types of abuse you've seen, is that typical for other states, or are you seeing differences in our state that we might need to be paying attention to more?
As I shared, the national average is 8 per 1,000 children, so we are well above that in terms of the number of children who are abused and neglected. Neglect is nationally typically the highest category. There's nothing that's outlying that I'm seeing.
So just a quick follow-up. So our rates of neglect aren't necessarily substantially higher in ratio to rates of physical abuse or sexual abuse compared to national averages?
I would have to look at the data to be absolutely certain, but I believe it's on trend.
Thank you.
Other questions from the council? Council Mills?
So, it looks like the big, to me, what jumps off the table is the neglect at 0 to 1, because that's also when a lot of the real severe psychological and other personality issues that come up. And so I guess I'd ask you, what can we do to address that and focus? Because I think if we can get the kids to 2, then there becomes more resources. But your personality disorders, the other things that never get fixed all happen in that 0 to 1, 0 to 2, if I'm not mistaken, right?
The early years are the most critical years for brain growth and development.
Right.
Yes.
So what can we, I'm asking you, what can we do? How do we address that? And I think that the rest of it follows. And then one other follow-up question, these numbers aren't cumulative, correct? So if you're saying there's 100 kids that are neglected 0 to 1 this year, then there's probably a good chance that the kids that are neglected at 2 years old were in that pot. So it's a cumulative total. So there's many more kids than what we're seeing every year.
Right. So for Androscoggin County, the reoccurrence is about 41%. So about 41% of the children have incurred abuse in the past. So that means you've got the rest that are new victims. Right.
So what can we do about addressing that early 0 to 1?
Over at Community Concepts, not only do we offer parent enrichment classes for any community member, it doesn't have to necessarily be a family that's already involved with DHHS who's seeking reunification. So not only do we offer those throughout all counties throughout the state of Maine, every county has a prevention council. We're funded through DHHS. Our contracts are right through them and the Maine Children's Trust. What we also do, what we build into our programs, because of the numbers being so high in these early years, we like to focus on some 0 to 5-year-olds with our play groups. We offer a free play group right on Canal Street at the Immigration Resource Center every Thursday from 10 to 11:30, and it's a good way for parents to come with their little ones under 5 years of age, make connections with families, and As a matter of fact, just last week, we had about 20 parents attend. So it was a pretty large group. So getting out there in the community, I do the tabling of the events, and I pass out all of this information when I go to like movie nights in the park, resource fairs, all of that. I was just at the Lewiston Library for baby and infant story time during school vacation. I went to the Lewiston Public Library as well as the Auburn Public Library, and I passed out activity bags that encompassed all of the protective factors. And I had my little talks with families as they came in and passed out that information that did give them and provide them with our parent enrichment classes and our play groups. And like the next day, our play group like was right through the roof. It was pretty amazing. So.
Can I add in real quick? Broadly, I think normalizing.
I don't want her to feel like I was questioning her, because I
yeah,
didn't mean
that's
to.
okay.
I meant as a society, how do we address
Yeah.
this? That, you
Yeah.
know, I'm guessing there's a correlation between the neglected kids and the parents and the women that are testing positive for drug abuse and alcoholism, and that's, to me, like, I'm sure there's laws that restrict how much intervention we can do in those situations, and you know.
So I think we need to start early. We need to start very, very early with prevention. We need to normalize participating in services, in home visiting programs, and in helping. We need to normalize helping each other as neighbors and supporting one another. That way we have the supports in place should something go wrong. And we're not singling out anyone. There is not one parent who wants to abuse or neglect their child. They do not want to do that. So if we can start early and provide those robust services and those supports and make it available for everyone so that it's universally an option for all, that's the best that we can do to try and get in.
Thank you, yeah, and thank you for letting us know about this, and I think the more, because I think that 0 to 1 and 0 to 2, I see Dr. Doris and Dr. Brown back there, that's, the better we do at that age group, the better the outcomes are as they get older.
And
Not
I'll
that
say
it's not.
prenatally too.
Councilor Geary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for coming today. But as a good Councilor Milks was saying, it's not just the 0 to 1 or 0 to 2. It's also once a lady knows she's pregnant, she's got to watch out what she gets into. I've run across a few constituents that don't think smoking grass or any other stuff is going to bother the baby. They'll say, oh, it's not too bad, it's not too this, and I don't know what else. It brings very close to home. My niece, she was one of these that, oh, I'm just, it's fine, I'm not doing it to excess. Yeah, she drove her car on out by the lake into the swamp. She missed the turn. Not before she was pregnant. I mean, that was before she was pregnant. After she was pregnant, she still stuck around with people that got into drinking, smoking. The outcome of my long-winded story is she gave birth to a beautiful little girl a little early, but that girl is handicapped, disabled. She's now 14, going on 15, and she'll never leave her mom's house because she cannot communicate. She can communicate only by some sign language and some sounds, but she doesn't get interested with other things that other kids can get into. And it's a drag of such a beautiful little girl that's growing up into such a great young lady. And so we got to figure ways to reach these parents beforehand.
I agree.
Councilor Cowan.
I just want to emphasize that of the protective factors, there's a lot of opportunity for community members, right? I believe that when we look at child protective factors as opposed to the adverse childhood events, one strong adult relationship can make all the difference. So, I think there's a lot that we can do by making people aware that their impact, as much as they can do, can have a big impact. And I also, just to follow up on Councilor Milks, your comment about drug abuse and issues. National survey looking at state rates of adverse childhood experiences. Maine ranked 8th highest worst rate of children 0 to 17, where there was a report of an adult in the household that was struggling with substance abuse, and somewhere around that same rate, one of the highest top 10 rates of those who are a parent struggling with mental health. So the other thing that we can continue to do is the hard work that Maine is doing to try to address those issues on a broader scale.
Other questions from the council? On your 0 to 1 numbers, I think it was 59 cases, and do you have any further information about the breakdown of type? Is that mostly neglect? Do you know what the breakdown is for those age groups?
Unfortunately, we don't have that breakdown.
And are you able to break down the numbers for Auburn, cases that occurred in Auburn, as opposed to Androscoggin County?
I am not sure if that would be available by requesting. We do not have that specifically as a prevention council and as an organization, but that may be one of the data points that you can request from the Office of Child and Family Services. And
the last question I had is, I agree with what a number of councilors have said about the early intervention. Are you aware, are there risk assessments that are taking place during pregnancy, prior to birth, to try to be able to identify people that are at risk, whose child will be at risk potentially, and intervene prior to the birth and potential abuse taking place?
So I don't work for an OB's
No,
office.
I understand. Just wondering
so
if
I can't
yeah.
speak specifically to the assessments that they do. Having children myself, I can tell you I experienced some of those assessments during my pregnancy.
Okay. Thank you very much. We really appreciate you coming in, sharing the information with us.
Welcome.
The next item on the agenda is communications. In the packet, there are communications from 4 nonprofit organizations requesting funding in the upcoming budget. Life Flight's requesting $2,000. Kennebec Behavioral Health is requesting $400 to assist with uncompensated care in Auburn. Androscoggin Land Trust is requesting $20,000, and Lake Stewards of Maine $1,500. I point out to the council that if you have a desire to include any or all of these in the budget, when we take up the budget resolve, it would require amendment to move any of those items into the budget. We'll move on to the first open session of the night. Members of the public are invited to speak to the council about any issue related to city business that's not on tonight's agenda. If you'd like to address the council, please approach the podium and provide your name and address.
My name is Pam Russo, 745 West Auburn Road. I want to thank you for doing the brush cleanup.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public who'd like to address the council? Seeing none, we'll close the open session and move on to unfinished business. There's no unfinished business on the agenda. Is the council aware of any unfinished business to come before the council? Seeing none, we'll move on to new business. We'll return to the items that were moved from the consent agenda and take up order 650506 2024, appointing Adam Lee to serve on the Lewiston Auburn Railroad Corporation for a 3-year term, April 2024 through April 2027. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second. Moved by Councilor Platts. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Geary. Discussion by the council?
I
Councilor
would,
Eisner.
thank you, Mr. Mayor. About this, I feel that having more information given to us so that we can make an educated, if there's people that we, in our constituents, in our areas that we can find so that we can see who's probably best qualified to see if there's somebody that could serve or has vast numerous experience with railroads that we can find within our constituents that we can best have them come in. And that's for both items, but that's kind of my take on it.
Other questions or discussion by the council? Councilor Geary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I pulled up the council agenda packet and I saw all the nominations, since I'm on the nomination committee, I said, wait a minute. I don't remember we appointed these two to the railroad board. And so I quickly called our city clerk's office because I had also had constituents ask me, because they too would have, if they had known there was positions opened, that they might have would like to have submitted an application to also be thought of to be considered. So when I got called from the city clerk's office, they said, it's a mayor's appointment. I said, oh, okay. But still, out of courtesy, we should have, I know, Mr. Mayor, you're wise and you know people and you got a good grasp of a person's character, so I know you would put, if it was your choice, to put people on committee. But out of respect for us in the future, I would like to see it put out there, if for any board, whether you put them on or not, like when you put out there about the homeless committee or the housing committee, you put it out there so people, if they really wanted to get on there, then they could have contacted you to be able to be placed there. Nobody knew about this railroad. And then early this evening, when we were all gathering and a question was asked to you, how did these people get put there? And you had mentioned that Phil had come up with some people that, I don't know if they contacted him or not, and you were able to figure out from what Phil had told you, which you thought, I guess, or he thought he guessed, what would make two good appointments. Our objection, or at least mine, that taking these two people off is not because of their qualifications or not, but because of how it got put there.
Yeah, just for clarification for the council and the public, so there are numerous ways in the charter and ordinances in which people are recommended or nominated for boards and committees, and some come before the council and some are at the discretion of the mayor. The Railroad Corporation positions are recommendations made by the city administration, and they come before the council for confirmation. In this particular case, the city manager was looking for interested people. He created a list, and as I understand it, as is typically my experience trying to recruit people for boards and committees, that these are the two of the group that said that they would participate. And Mr. Manager, do you want to add anything to that?
Thanks, Mayor. So this is not a typical board or committee that the appointment committee process goes through. It's not a city board or committee. They are operated under their own set of bylaws as the Lewis and Auburn Rail Corporation. Their process for selection is only specified in their bylaws for when there's a vacancy. The existing directors of the corporation that represent the municipality can fill that seat. However, there's nothing that specifies in the bylaws other than it needs to be a municipal appointment. And so this is the process that's been done. We're following a very similar process that's been done in the past. We're very fortunate Jessica is here with us tonight. We appreciate her willingness to serve I think when we look for people to serve, as you all know, those who have served on the appointment committee process, it's a challenge, it's a commitment from individuals. When we took a look at those that could potentially serve on this, currently, Kristen Cloutier is one of the representatives from the city of Lewiston. We felt that having a representative, a state representative for Auburn on the board would be appropriate, and so that's why I did reach out to Adam Lee. And then in speaking with Jonathan Labonte, who's the current president of the rail, we talked about other areas that the board, the corporation is working on, and economic development was one of those areas that we felt would be a need to have representation. And so that's why I reached out to Jessica with her involvement with economic development, that felt that she would be a great candidate for that, and she was willing to do so. So that's the process. It's not a normal vacancy that you'll see on the website. If the council desires to have a different process, then we can tee that up in the future, and we can make that available through policy, through ordinance, but it just currently doesn't exist. And so that's the process that we follow, which has been consistent.
Any further questions or comments from the council?
Yeah,
Council Mills.
Mr. Manager, I guess my concern was, I guess you're saying it's an advantage having Mr. Lee being a representative and Kristen Cloutier being the majority leader, if I'm not mistaken. Is there a subordinate type role there and a conflict of interest? That would be my concern.
Yeah.
And that was my concern.
Yeah, I don't believe there is. They operate in a very separate capacity in their function as what they're appointed to do by the bylaws that's set up for the Lewiston Auburn Rail. So there would be no conflict of interest in them serving together on that.
Council Whiting.
I think in light of the confusion that this LA Railroad issue brings up every time, it's particularly beneficial to have an attorney who was a previous city councilor. In terms of Mr. Lee, his experience will allow him to step into that position and do a very good job without the confusion that much of the public has about it, because it's sort of buried in the minutiae of ancient, associations we have with our sister city.
Other questions or comments for the council? Council Platt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I would just, to weigh in, make a quick comment. I guess with respect to the councilors' opinions on this matter, I kind of fall on this as I think the danger is confusing this organization with any of the other committees that come out of the appointment committee. And I think it's not apples to apples, it's apples to oranges. So I kind of stand as if it's precedent, as if this is how it's been done for either mayoral appointed positions. I think recently at a meeting, we, in the consent agenda, approved several appointments actually made by Democratic and Republican county chairs for some position. My point is, these things happen. So I'm more concerned with precedent and policy and procedure. So I'm personally okay with the way this has played out. But if there are desires by the council to change procedure in the future to make this an appointment that goes through the appointment committee, perhaps that is a reasonable solution. But for this vote today, I'm in support of the way it's been presented in the agenda.
Other questions or comments? Council Walker.
Thank you. The only thing that I would ask is something like this comes out, I think we should have more information, especially we're going to make this vote tonight, and I'm not sure that we've vented through it enough to see if there were other people maybe qualified, because I'm thinking that we might have some people that that would fit into this, and we could at least know if there was more than 5 people or 2 people or nobody. But if you're asking me to vote, I would at least like to know the information and how you got to where you are before we see it on here and come here to vote.
Council Wise.
I concur with that.
Any other comments or questions from the council? Seeing none, council ready for the question? Vote will be by show of hands. All in favor?
We got 2.
What's that?
We got 2 separate ones.
Yeah, we'll do them separately.
Right? So Which one are we doing first?
We're doing the one that was called first, which is Order 650506-2024, appointing Adam Lee. Vote will be by show of hands. All in favor? Opposed? 3 having voted in the affirmative and 4 in the negative. The motion fails. The next item will be Order 660506-2024, appointing Jessica Donovan to serve on the Lewiston Auburn Railroad Corporation for a 3-year term, April 2024 through April 2027. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilor Platts and seconded by Councilor Whiting. Discussion by the council. Chair will recognize that much of the prior discussion is pertinent to this item as well. Is there any further discussion on this item?
Mr. Mayor, just want to highlight the experience and expertise of economic development does seem like a very good fit for this committee. So appreciate your willingness to come forward.
Any other questions or discussion by the council? Council ready for the question? Vote will be by show of hands. All in favor? Those opposed? 4 having voted in the affirmative and 3 in the negative, the motion is adopted. The next item is Order 670506-2024, appointing Jonathan Labonte to vote the shares held by any shareholder for the Lewiston Auburn Railroad Corporation. As clarification, I think there may be some questions about what this appointment is for. Under the Railroad Corporation, the City of Lewiston and the City of Auburn are the only shareholders, and the votes at the annual meeting are placed by one individual voting all of the shares for the shareholder, in this case Auburn. And the recommendation is to appoint Jonathan Labonte, who's the Transportation Director, to vote the shares for Lewiston Auburn. Is there a motion?
Motion to move.
Moved by Councilor Walker,
Second.
seconded by Councilor Geary. Is there discussion by the council?
I want to thank you for explaining that because I did not know that.
Yeah, and
That was a concern of my constituent, so thank you for explaining how that works, because I couldn't explain it.
yeah, you're very welcome. And Mr. Manager, as my understanding, although you could clarify this, is Mr. Labonte has voted the shares at the prior annual meeting. Is that correct?
I don't believe so. I think Mayor Levesque was the last appointed individual to vote the shares. However, Jonathan Labonte is the current president of the board. He can cast. The way that it's set up in the bylaws, as the mayor said, it's one individual casts that vote for the 3 members who will represent the total shares for the City of Auburn.
So further questions or discussion by the council? Council ready for the question? Vote will be by show of hands. All in favor? Opposed? 7 having voted in the affirmative and none in the negative, the motion is adopted. The next item of business is Order 690506-2024, initiating ordinance amendment process to Chapter 60, Zoning, Article 16, Administration and Enforcement, Division 2, Site Plan Review, and Section 60.2 Definitions. The council will recall that Mr. Cousins from Planning and Permitting briefed the council at a work session some time ago, maybe 6 or 8 weeks ago, about this issue. The issue is removing the 60-day presumptive approval of site plan reviews that come before the planning board. And the idea is to remove that so that there's time for the planning board to take up more complicated site plan applications, and also to avoid a presumptive approval for non-compliant applications. I think that planning and permitting address both the 60-day presumptive approval and then the means to get the matter still in front of the planning board in a timely manner. Is there a motion?
Motion to move.
Second.
Moved by Councilor Walker, seconded by Councilor Weisner. Is there discussion by the council?
So for clarification, what you said was, this is removing the automatic 60-day?
Yeah, the order will forward this to the planning board for review and recommendation. It'll come back for first and second reading and public hearing to the council. It removes the automatic 60-day. Mr. Cousins is here and can answer questions. My recollection is that it still moves the item from staff review to public hearing as soon as the staff review is done or within 60 days. Is that correct, Mr. Cousins?
Yes, it is, Mr. Mayor, and clarifies some other parts of the review process so that when we send applications out to the staff review groups, that it lines up with the current meeting schedule to keep them on track for planning board.
So was this pushed forward was this staff initiative? Where did this initiative come from?
Yeah, this was
I think I
something
must
that
have
we
missed it.
discussed at a council meeting a number of months ago, and then we've worked through to make sure that it works well with the meeting schedules that we have internally, but also the planning board schedule, and prevents that if the planning board needed, let's say they needed information on traffic because there was a hazard identified, it would prevent a project from becoming automatically approved while they're waiting for that report from the applicant.
Councilor Geary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So you're saying this will give the planning board more time in order to go through all the stuff needed to make sure they follow everything according to our code and ordinance?
Yes, if they've identified a deficiency, it would give them more time to get the information that they need to make that decision.
But on the other hand, could it streamline it and send it through the process at a more quicker pace than what is currently happening?
I don't see any example that would make it faster. It doesn't necessarily slow it down either, but in the case where there's missing information, it would prevent a project from becoming automatically approved if we were still waiting for information. And there was a risk of that with the way that it was written before.
Any other questions or comments by the council?
Mr. Mayor, I would just say as I read that ordinance, my biggest takeaway was that it was being retweaked to prevent the automatic approval of a site plan that did not meet spec. And basically, the timeline is being changed to protect that provision so that there's no auto approval. That's how I read it.
Correct.
In the past, have we had any issues with auto approvals?
We haven't had, in the time that I've been here, a little over 18 years, we have not had one go to automatic approval. We've always been able to get the developer to agree to an extension to provide the information. But if there was a case where the developer didn't agree to that, the way that it was written, the way that it is written, they could potentially say, no, we don't agree to that, and it could become approved.
Further questions or discussion by the council? Councilor Mills?
Is there a danger without having the automatic, for lack of better, deadline, that a staff could purposely delay something?
So if my understanding, and Mr. Cousins, you can clarify this, I think the answer to that is no. It still requires the director of planning and permitting to make the request to the chair of the planning board as soon as their review is done. They don't have to wait for the 60 days, but it requires them, once a complete application is submitted, they must make the request for the public hearing no later than 60 days after it's received. And the new language has provision that the planning board cannot unreasonably delay the final determination after the public hearing. I think to take care of the concern that you're pointing out, which is you don't want a situation where it can get stalled out unreasonably either with the staff or with the planning board. So we try to have a balancing act between a presumptive approval, but still having some certainty and of timing and moving the thing through the process for the public and the developers.
And there's still staff level approvals?
Yes, this doesn't change which projects, and Auburn has a lot more flexibility in some cases than in other communities for staff level approvals. This doesn't change which projects get a staff level versus planning board approval.
Any further questions or discussion by the council? And as a reminder, the council, before we move the question, this is to forward this to the planning board for their review and recommendation. It'll come back to you for first and second reading after they have had a chance to review it. Is council ready for the question? Vote will be by show of hands. All in favor? Opposed? 5 having voted in the affirmative and 2 in the negative, the motion is adopted. The next item is Ordinance 090506, 2024, amending Chapter 60, Article 4, Division 12, General Business District, to be amended by including manufacture, compounding, and assembly of articles using Maine-derived forest products, agricultural products, or other natural resource inputs as a special exception use with a condition that the site must be located within the Maine Forest Bioproducts Advanced Manufacturing Tech Hub Overlay District. The council will recall that Mr. Brenchek provided a briefing on this, I think 2 meetings ago. This will be associated to the next item. This first item is the text amendment. It'll be for public hearing and a first reading. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Council Whiting. Is there a second?
Second?
Second by Council Cowan. Is there discussion by the council? Council Platt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a question. I'm not sure if any of us on the council can answer this, but in looking at I thought it was cleverly written. It really doesn't seem to affect a ton of land. It's just the general business that's in the overlay. My question is, why does that little sliver of general business exist that's not connected to any other general business? How did that come to be? And I'm just curious what the difference between the little sliver of GB is and the industrial zone that abuts it.
Right. So the overlay district will overlay the existing industrial and general business zone. This overlay district won't change the zoning. It will create this overlay and it'll allow some new activities in general business. These activities are already allowed in the industrial zone, and Mr. Cousins might have insight into how the general business and industrial is laid out.
The reason I asked that question, I'm curious why there was a portion of land that was preserved as general business without the ability to do some of these manufacturing uses, trying to understand what we may be imposing on the people who either live there or work there when we open up manufacturing processes for bioproducts and forest products.
In that little sliver, there's very few undeveloped parcels, and I think from looking back at earlier comp plans and discussions, there are a lot of residential uses on those developed parcels. There's some larger multifamily housing, there's single families. So I think there was a desire not to make all of those non-conforming, which may be why the general business stayed around, because it allowed for that. General business does allow for light manufacturing, which is usually assembling pre-manufactured parts, essentially, not making the materials, making the parts from raw materials. It is a small land area that's surrounded otherwise by industrial uses, and in many of those lots within that sliver, it's one lot deep on either side of the road that's still general business. So the big change really is that you could do a heavier manufacturing with these Maine-based fiber products within that area, whereas you can already do that in the neighboring properties. But most of those are developed lots too, already.
Are there other questions or discussion by the council? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing on this item. If any member of the public would like to provide input to the council, please approach the podium and provide your name and address.
My name is Pam Russo, 745 West Auburn Road. I am concerned about those people. I was at the meeting, and I believe, and I may be wrong on the exact numbers, but right now they can do, let's say, 1,000 square feet, and then they can do like 10,000 square feet. And I don't think it's very, to be bigger manufacturer. And so I think that I was here when some of the people from that area talked, and I think that's just not really great. I think you could do it further out. You don't need to do it right where people are living right now and have lived for many, many years. I just don't think that's fair. I think that you could move it out a little bit away from where people live.
Thank you. Are there other members of the public that would like to address the council on this item? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Is there further discussion by the council? Council ready for the question? Vote will be by roll call. The clerk will call the roll.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Yes.
5 having voted in the affirmative and 2 in the negative, the motion is adopted. The next item will be Ordinance 10-0506, 2024, creating the Maine Bioproducts Advanced Manufacturing Tech Hub Overlay District map. This is the companion to the previous item that the sole purpose of this is to identify the boundaries of the district. Is there a motion?
So,
Moved by Councilor Whiting. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Cowan. Is there discussion by the council? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing on this item. If there's members of the public that would like to address the council on this item, please approach the podium and provide your name and address. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Is there any further discussion or questions by the council? Council ready for the question? The vote will be by roll call. The clerk will call the roll.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
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 5 having voted in the affirmative and 2 in the negative, the motion is adopted. The next order of business is Order 70-0506, 2024, adopting the fiscal year 2025 budget for the Auburn School Department. The FY25 operating budget is $62,123,473. This budget represents a 5.2% overall increase with a 4.8% increase in the local funding portion of $957,590. Is there a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to adopt the fiscal year 2025 budget of the Auburn School Department.
Moved by Councilor Platts. Is there a second? Second. Seconded by Councilor Whiting. Is there a discussion by the council? Councilor Geary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know the school department tried to cut, but I think they could cut even lower than what they've come in at and still not affect teachers. So with the state of affair with our city's budget, I cannot support the school budget.
Any other comments, Councilor Milks?
I'm going to support the school budget this year, and I would ask Councilor Platts to bring forward my concerns earlier from our workshop, and Dr. Doris, that we move forward quickly on our evaluation of the buildings and seriously look at how we can consolidate.
Are there other questions or comments by the council? I would like to point out that I realize the 5% increase is a substantial increase, but I do want to thank Dr. Brown and the members of the school department for the work they did bringing the budget forward. If anyone has been following what's been going on in the central Maine area with school budget increases, this is about half of what most districts are putting forward to their legislative body for approval. It's the lowest that I've seen, and while it's certainly a substantial increase, I think the school department has done an excellent job coming in with a budget, understanding the situation, and trying to do what they can to hold costs down while still delivering the priority services to our students. Is there any other questions or comments from the council?
Mr. Mayor, I concur with your comments. I also just point out that there were a number of challenging decisions, I think, in terms of eliminating 5 positions and from the operating budget and 9 positions funded from what I think of COVID funds, but and transferring only 6. So, you know, I think there's a lot of hard work already thought in terms of how they're trying to remove positions that without significantly impacting the students. The sense I got from answers that we asked in budget workshops was that any further cuts could actually have an impact on our students' experiences. So for that reason, I support the budget this year.
Further questions or comments by the council? Council Walker.
I'd like to thank you for the hard work that you've done also. I have a real hard time voting for this, but I think you did probably as much as anybody could have done, so I will vote in favor of it.
Further comments by the council? Council Whiting.
Yeah, I'd just like to comment. I think that the great working relationship between the city manager and the superintendent of schools has produced about as low an increase as we could get, given the new high school, technology demands, staffing demands, and all of, and mandates in particular. The special ed mandate it's very expensive and not fully compensated. So I think they did an excellent job.
Other comments or questions by the council? Seeing none, council ready for the question? Vote will be by show of hands. All in favor? Opposed? 5 having voted in the affirmative and 2 in the negative, the motion is adopted. The next item is Resolve 040506-2024, adopting the appropriations resolve for fiscal 2025. This is the total budget. The aggregate portion for the City of Auburn is $121,825,948, with a municipal budget of $54,256,734, a county budget of $3,117,240, and a school department budget of $62,123,472. Of the $121 million, non-property tax revenue makes up $67,511,382. The total tax levy will include a municipal revenue budget of $26,142,646 and the school department revenue of $41,368,735. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Moved by Councilor Walker. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Whiting. Discussion by the council.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Geary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to put an amendment on this budget. When we were talking at our last workshop, I said that I would like to see that we cut our councilors' and mayor's pay to bring it back to what it was a few years back when we got 18,000, excuse me, 1,800, not 18,000, 1,800 a year, and it was bumped up to $4,000. And the mayor's pay was like 3,000, and then it got bumped up to 7. So I'd like to turn back the clock, at least for this budget year, to cut our pay. I know it's not going to add up to a whole lot, but it shows that we care, and that the only thing we really have, we as counselors have, is to cut our pay. That's the only real say that we have, that we can contribute and make a lasting impression.
Councillor Geary has moved to reduce the pay of the mayor and council back to the previous amounts. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
It's been seconded by Councillor Whiting. As a point of clarification, this will not affect the FY25 budget. The charter does not permit the council to modify the pay for the current sitting council. So this would be separate. It's financially related, so I'll allow it to go to a vote, but just to be clear, it'll have no effect on the FY25 budget.
Respectfully, Mr. Mayor, I am going to sort of challenge it, because in ordinance, and in the charter, it says that sitting council cannot set the pay of the current. In other words, we can't give us a raise when we're sitting in office. We can only approve the next council after the election coming in to get the money. It does not say that we can cut us lower.
It doesn't specifically say you can't cut it lower, but my understanding, and the manager may want to add clarification to this, this came up at the budget workshop, and I believe that the compensation itself cannot be modified for the current sitting council.
Thanks, Mayor. I think you're correct in that. If I did not move forward with seeking legal until there was a majority here, I think that the council should think about when we did the compensation increase as we compared with other municipalities. And we did a lot of discussions as it pertains to ensuring that we have an opportunity to bring the public into this seat and some of the financial hardships that some may have to serve on a council like this. We talked about individuals that might need childcare to be able to come in and serve. And so there was a lot of discussion regarding the compensation. That is strictly your privilege as a council. You can move forward with it. Just think you will be further behind any other municipality if you were to go back to those previous numbers. I would, if this does pass in the first reading, I will get legal consideration before the second reading, but I would agree with the mayor currently with it not being really specific. I would go towards modification of that compensation would be in the future term, but we would seek legal review on that.
Councilor Mills.
I would consider this as it's on its own, as a separate entity, because I'm, for simplicity of this budget, I'm gonna vote against the amendment but I would be more than willing to consider this on its own.
Mr. Mayor, I would agree with Councilor Milk's sentiments. Also, just as a point of clarification, is a counselor voluntarily allowed to forego a paycheck and leave it in the coffers?
Mr. Manager.
Yeah, so we went through this, I believe it was either last year or year before. We are required to go ahead and compensate you as a council. It's up to the council to determine what you would like to do with those funds after you receive them. But we are required to give you that compensation and not hold that.
Councilor Walker.
Thank you. I just want to put in my 2 cents. I think as councilors, we've done a lot of work, especially in this budget. We have gone through the budget, I don't know how many times, and we've done it many times on our, at least I have, on my own computer, at my own house, sat there, crossed out this, added that, subtracted this, said we don't need this, we don't want that. I've also called the manager, I don't know how many times, talked with him. I think any amount of money that they pay us, we have well earned doing our job to get this city to do the cuts that we ask them to do. If we're gonna start cutting employees, and that's how I look at us, then we need to go down through the whole employees of this city and ask them to take a cut. So I'm not in favor of asking the council to take cuts that we haven't asked other people to do before us.
Other questions or discussion by the council? Councilor Cowan?
Just to thank Councilor Platts for your question, because I was going to ask a similar one. And then just to respond to Councilor Walker's comments. I look at it a little differently in that I think we're paid for our service. I think we have asked, well, we haven't necessarily cut current employees. We've asked for some serious deliberation and cuts and sacrifices in our departments. We've done a great job, I think, of avoiding having to cut jobs. But what I interpret Councilor Gary's proposal is more of a recognition of that hard sacrifice that we're asking of the many great staff in the city. I don't think it's reasonable to do since we're not going to be saving this year, but I think, the idea if someone wanted to be able to forfeit or return dollars in a recognition of that, great.
Further discussion by the council? Councilor Gary?
Okay. When the vote is taken, I'm asking for a roll call.
Councilor Gary has requested a roll call on the amendment. Council ready for the question? Vote will be by roll call. The clerk will call the roll.
Councillor Milks?
No.
Councillor Weisner?
No.
Councillor Walker?
No.
Councillor Gary? Yes. Councillor Platts?
No.
Councillor Whiting? No. Councillor Cowan?
No.
1 having voted in the affirmative and 6 having voted in the negative, the motion fails. I would point out, Councilor Gary, relative to Councilor Milks' prior statement, 2 or more councilors can place this on a future agenda. I would suggest that if there's an intention to do that, that you coordinate with the manager so he can get legal advice prior to it being placed on the agenda. We'll return to the main motion, which is Resolve 040506, 2024. Is there further discussion by the council? Is there any public comment on the budget resolve? If there's any member of the public that would like to address the council, please approach the podium, provide your name and address. Seeing none, is the council ready for the question? Councilor Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know we've had a lot of increases. I know we've done some cuttings of the budget. I understand the fact that the only thing that we can cut anymore is probably people, and I don't want to cut people. The situation we are in because of all our employees happened through the last few years of the previous terms. We kind of got distracted trying to put out fires and move things ahead that we were not totally keeping track of how more employees, especially the high-end people, got added into the budget. And now they're in the budget, and I cannot figure a way to cut them and hurt them. But because of this rise in the budget, I know there's a lot of people out there that cannot afford this increases that we're going to be getting them to do. I know there's revenue coming in, but sometimes it takes a little bit it takes a little longer for that revenue to come in to make a more meaningful impact on what our people have to pay in their taxes. So I cannot, in good conscience, vote for this budget, and I know there's a provision in our ordinances that we have to stay below or at the consumer price index. And I know at this moment, from what indications are, I think we will be over that. And if we're over that, we're going to have to be forced to vote to go over it. So I cannot support this.
Any other discussion or questions by the council?
Yes.
Council Eisner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've heard from several constituents upset about this budget being way too high and the effects that it's going to have on their taxes. Previous last year increases that have gone on, and it's definitely something that's on their mind. And I was very vocal about it in the past workshops, and definitely if always willing to look at this some more and do that for that reason. Where I'm hearing from my constituents and hearing their voices, I will be voting no.
Is there other questions or discussion by the council? Similar, Council Whiting.
Yeah, I'd just like to point out that we went over this budget with a fine-tooth comb, and we met week after week after week, and nobody was able to come up with the cuts that they would need to justify their voting for, I'm not very clear about this, but I feel as though the council did its due diligence, and the cost of living last year, we were below that. We're above it this year. The average of the 2 years is we're staying roughly in line with inflation, averaged out over the 2 years. And due to the major labor contracts that were signed, we're over this year. But on average, we've been keeping pace with inflation. And money does not grow on trees. Government is not exempt from the ravages of inflation. I understand I got an anonymous phone call today complaining about the budget increase. And I'm sorry we couldn't get it lower, but we couldn't, and I'll be voting in favor.
Further discussion, Council Platt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just make one comment. As we all go through and we place our individual votes, I would say if this vote does not pass, I would ask anyone who votes no to please come to the next workshop with discrete suggestions on how we can cut this budget. Because to Councilor Whiting's point, I think it's one thing to say, I want a lesser budget, and it's another thing to come up with ways to do that. I certainly don't know where else to look. I'm open to anyone's opinion who feels this budget is still too high. I will be supporting this budget, but that's because I have no discrete suggestions other than laying off folks to get this budget low.
Council Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also agree with Mr. Wyden and Mr. Adams. I think we did everything that we could do without losing people in the city. And we went through that once before, and that was not fun for any of us. So I will vote for this budget, and I'm sorry that the people out there that are going to get hurt by it, but we also know that the city's got to move forward. We can't bury our head in the sand and think that we can vote it down. We just can't do that.
Other comments? Council Cowan.
I just want to reemphasize one piece that Councilor Whiting highlighted that would be hard for anyone to necessarily see unless they were really digging into the numbers. And that's what I truly believe, based on the conversations we've had and the information provided by staff and the city manager, is that in this year's budget, we have a large proportion of our cost of living increase that's really retroactive. And that was because of negotiations, just the timing of negotiations with labor unions and such. And so I think we really, truly, to cut it any further, we're talking jobs, and then that's really results in decrease in services. So I too don't see how we can cut it any further out, having a substantial impact on the services. If constituents want to come forward with ideas of things that they were willing to cut in terms of public safety or public works, I welcome their thoughts. But I think we have done what we can. My hope is that and from what if I understood everything correctly, this anomaly is truly an anomaly. It's not something that's going to happen every other year. It's something that has rarely happened. And so I don't think we're going to see that level of impact on our budget in the next few years as we have this year.
Councilor Milks.
Well, I think we are going to see budget increases over the next few years, and I think that's reality. I think inflation's out of control and it's not getting any better. And police, firemen, public works, those are services that cost money. And so we have two choices: either raise taxes, cut services, or there is a third choice, and that's if we want to be serious about economic development and really bringing business and growth into our city and being serious about it, or we're going to have to seriously next year look at major cuts, I think, because we're going to have to determine what departments don't we need. And so I'm voting for this budget, but I think, Mr. Manager, that's the reality is that's what's coming, is that we're going to have to cut people next year and cut services, because the taxes can't keep going up. People can't afford to live here.
Further discussion by the council. A few comments that I would make. I think that the total tax levy increase of 5.9% is a substantial increase. It's going to be difficult for some members of the community to be able to accommodate such increase. I think, however, that the increase is the best that the council could do and still deliver the services that the community needs and wants to have. I would point out, as I did relative to the school budget, I was at the Maine Mayor's Coalition meeting midweek last week and talked to some mayors of similarly situated communities. Lewiston's going to have a 10% total tax levy increase. The city of South Portland's going to have a 10.1% increase. The city of Westbrook's going to have a 10.8% increase. So I think that the manager and the city staff and the city council have worked hard to try to push the increase down as low as they possibly could, while still understanding this is going to be a painful increase for the people of Auburn. But I think relative to what else I see going on with similarly situated communities, I think that the city administration and the council have done the best they can to try to deliver the services that people of Auburn need, while trying to limit the increase as much as they possibly could. Is there other comments by the council? Seeing none, is the council ready for the question? This will be a first reading. The vote will be by show of hands. All in favor? Opposed? 5 having voted in the affirmative, 5 being the number necessary to adopt at first reading. The motion is adopted. The next item of business will be Order 710506, 2024, initiating ordinance amendment process to Section 60-2 definitions, Article 13, Division 2, phosphorus control, Article 4, Division 3, low-density country residential district, and Division 4, Lake Auburn Watershed Overlay District, including, adoption of associated zoning maps, all within Chapter 60 of the Code of Ordinances. These changes relate to subsurface wastewater systems and residential development within the watershed. As a reminder to the council, this is a report back from Mr. Cousins and the planning and permitting staff after working with the work groups that were identified by a previous council action. The council action tonight will refer these septic system and phosphorus changes to the planning board for their review and recommendation. It'll come back at a later date to the council for first and second reading. In general, this does not change the previously adopted septic standard. The two main pieces of this is to identify the means by which inspections will be implemented, including a phased approach over the next 5 years. Is there a motion?
Motion to move.
It's been moved by Councilor Walker. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Cowan. Is there any public comment on this item? If so, please approach the podium and provide your name and address. Seeing none, is a discussion by the council. Councilor Geary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When these groups did each their part and they come together and discuss it, was all the groups unanimous in their recommendation? Or was it, some opposed, some supported? Where were they on the gambit?
Councilor, I attended a couple of the last meetings. Mr. Cousins' staff was there throughout, so he may also want to comment on this. I don't think there was any formal votes taken. I would say from my observations of the meeting that it was a consensus process, and the group that worked on the septic issues, this is a consensus proposal being brought forth to the council. Mr. Cousins, do you want to add to that? I would just say I agree with you, Mr. Mayor. That's what I observed, and there was healthy debate, and I think the group reached consensus on the draft that you have in front of you. Councilor Mills.
Yeah, my question, we didn't have a workshop on this, and I know I had a constituent sent me a notice that this has already been planned for the public hearings already in the planning board meeting next week. And the order's here. So I'm just curious if we're just going to bypass council and we're going to just move forward with, have people with work groups decide policy, and we're just going to pass the city council.
I don't think the city council is being bypassed. Relative to the notices, the notice was made for the May 14th meeting because planning and permitting is required by ordinance to give so many days' notice for these zones.
I understand, but we didn't give them a resolve. We didn't give them an order to do that.
That's correct. Here's the issue. Planning and permitting is required by ordinance to provide notice, public notice in the newspaper so many days advance of when this will be taken up by the planning board. The planning board is required by ordinance to act on this within 30 days and return their result back to the city council. So it's not unusual. In fact, I think Mr. Cousins would agree that it's a very standard practice that the notice for the planning board at times goes out prior to the council acting. If the council does not refer this to the planning board tonight, the planning board won't take it up on the 14th. If the planning board, if we do forward this to the planning board, they'll have a public hearing and respond back to the council, which would then have a public hearing and 2 readings.
So is that accurate? Do you often do this, Eric? You send out notifications of public hearings prior to an order from the council?
We discussed the timeline.
Mr. Cousins, excuse me. I didn't mean to. I said Eric.
Oh, that's fine. We discussed the schedule and trying to keep this in front of planning board for the 14th, and we made that decision to send the notice out.
And my question, and I don't mean to be, is this common? Do you often do this? Do you often put notice out prior to council asking for you to do something?
Sometimes, yeah. It's not every time, certainly. I would say less often.
So this has been a fairly would you agree that this whole situation has been a fairly politically contentious situation over the you know,
Mr. Mayor, I think that, I understand what the council is asking. I think that way that staff responded is based on the order that was provided in January. So the order in January was to direct the city manager to have staff work with groups to then bring this back before you by a set date. We're late on that date. I think the group had numerous meetings. There was a lot of refinement that took place. But the process, so it's, my only concern is about process. So that normally, we may not necessarily have this specific type of process that occurred this time. So we had a process that already put these steps in motion. And so that first step was to direct the city manager to have staff work with the group and bring this order back to you to then to begin the initiation of the action of the planning board to now move forward in that process. So that's why the posting was done, because this is all was triggered by the action that was taken in January. No other reason. It was already set in motion on that order.
Understood. And my question is I'm being asked to vote on something to send to the planning board, and it's in the packet. There's 10, 12 pages of redlined stuff, and this is my third term. Ordinarily, major things like this, there's a workshop where we can ask questions, and so I can. This is not. So, I'm going to make a motion to table to a date certain that we can get a workshop to the city council so that I can get some information and understand what is being asked.
I second that motion.
A motion to table is not debatable. Is the council ready for the question? Vote will be by show of hands. All in favor? Opposed? The motion will be tabled.
To a date specific, I said, to a time when we can get a workshop. Maybe do the workshop
So-
at the next city council meeting?
So to clarify this, before we close this item out, in the past, there's been, I've heard numerous complaints from members of the public about the city council having workshops, acting on the first night on zoning items in a first reading before it's sent to the planning board, and then having it come back for second reading. The process you're in right now would have, all you're doing tonight is referring this to the planning board. This would have gone to the planning board. The planning board would have provided their recommendations. We're not sure of the date at that, because within their 30 days, they would have had till May 14th, or they could have gone to June 11th if they needed a second meeting to work on that. Once we got the report back, it would have gone on the council agenda. There would be a workshop, then there would be a first reading and a public hearing, and then there would be a second reading. So there is nothing in this process that's actually eliminating in any way the ability of the council to act. This process is actually providing a more open ability for the public to respond after the planning board has had an opportunity first to review this and provide recommendations.
So, Mr. Mayor, just to be clear, so we just added a workshop, another one of these, planning board, another workshop, and then 2 hearings?
We haven't done anything that wasn't going to occur other than to move this to the next meeting. This is going to be on the meeting again for the next agenda. It's got the exact same thing is going to happen.
I think I asked for I said, tabled to a date specific after we've had a workshop.
To clarify, though, it sounds like we're gonna have a workshop after it comes back from the planning board, so are you requesting a pre-workshop? Before we send it to the planning board, then a second workshop after that?
I didn't ask for a second workshop. I asked for this.
That's what's going to happen.
Okay.
It's not appropriate for the city council to be acting on zoning, text, and map amendments prior to the planning board having opportunity to review and provide their recommendations to the council. I don't see that the council should go outside that process. The council should base their workshop discussion and their first reading based on a review and recommendation by the planning board.
This is asking me to send the recommendation to the planning board that these changes, that, get their opinion on the changes that all these red lines on ordinance that currently exist.
This order is a referral to committee under Robert's rules. It says nothing whatsoever about the council's opinion of this matter that's before you. It's doing nothing but referring this to the planning board for their review and recommendation without comment by the council in any way. The planning board would then review and recommend this. It would come back to the council. We'll have a workshop, we'll have the first reading and a public hearing, and then subsequently we will have a second hearing. The council will have the benefit of the insight of the planning board when they have their workshop and their public hearing. Is there any further, Councilor Geary?
So, if we re-vote, I'm just saying if, I'm throwing this out there, and we change the vote to send it to the planning board for them to do their thing, when it comes back to us for a workshop, can we not have the first reading and public hearing on it the same night that we workshop it? Because if we get it and have to go through their recommendations, we may need a little bit more time than half hour later to vote on it. We may need to come back and forward questions to you or the city manager or the planning department.
Yeah, that's fine. If the sense of the council on any item that's going to come before them is to have the first reading on a night other than the workshop, if councilors bring that request forward, I'd be happy to have it set up on the agenda that way. Councilor Milks.
I would like to have a report from the people that did the work and are making the recommendations to know whether the ordinance is in place. I supported the ordinance. I'd like to know whether I even want to waste the planning board's time. I don't necessarily think they need to take this up at this point. The ordinance is in place. I'd like to have them come and explain to me why all these changes to the ordinance need to happen.
That's fine. Councilor Geary, to your point, if the...
Did the vote happen?
Councilor Geary, to your point, if you want to have a different outcome, a motion for reconsideration would need to be made by someone on the prevailing side.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to request a reconsideration on the vote.
Is there a second?
This was a vote to table, correct?
Correct. Councilor Whiting has seconded that. Is there any discussion? So the vote is for reconsideration. This is just to bring the tabling item back on the table. Councilor Milks.
It's just a point of order. And Emily, welcome to Auburn. Could you, I'm assuming the mayor is correct on Robert's rules. Are we doing this correctly?
Yes, procedurally, you're following the Robert's
Thank you
rules.
very much.
Any further discussion? On the reconsideration, the vote will be by show of hands. All in favor?
This is a show of hands for a vote to table? To
No,
reconsider?
this is a show of hands on the motion for reconsideration, which would then put the motion to table back on the table. Those opposed? 4 having voted in the affirmative and 3 in the negative, the motion is adopted. The motion to table is back on the floor. The vote will be by show of hands. All those in favor?
I have,
Councilor Platt?
I did have a comment, a detail, no?
At this
Are we through
point,
that?
the motion to table that's on the floor is non-debatable, requires an immediate
Apologies, this
vote.
is still the motion to table, apologies.
The vote will be by show of hands. This is, the tabling motion is back on the table. Those in favor of tabling? Those opposed? 3 having voted in the affirmative and 4 in the negative, the tabling motion fails. We are back to the order, the main motion, which is Order 710506, 2024. Is there further discussion by the council?
Mr. Mayor, I had one point of clarification just on a detail. Under section 60, 1065 definitions, 4th paragraph down, future area to be developed. Eric, Mr. Cousins, could you explain to me how the developable acreage in Lake Auburn went from 1,180 acres to 0.15 acres?
To 150 acres. I can see why you'd say that, but I believe the intent there is 150 acres because that's the approximate developable area.
That
now
makes
that
more
we've
sense.
reduced the ag zone.
I was
to
looking at
only
that
allow-
period in front of it, sorry.
Sorry, that's a good catch, though, to make sure that's clear.
Is there other discussion by the council? Is council ready for the question?
I got a question.
Council Mills.
Mr. Cousins, on that notice, when was the last time that the planning department issued a notice prior to an order from city council?
I'd have to look, but I think it's partly because we already had the order to work through this process that we were trying to stay on your schedule. And I can tell you, we're trying to deliver what you're asking for, but
I
that
understand.
pushed us to try to
I understand.
to stay
We-
on that schedule.
We could have the planning department research this, if you like, Councilor Milks, but this happened several times during the last council relative to zoning items when the planning board got notice prior to the council acting. Is there further discussion? Council ready for the question? All those in favor? Opposed? 4 having voted in the affirmative and 3 in the negative, the motion is adopted. The next item is Order 720506, 2024, approving the liquor license for the Hilton Garden Inn. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilor Milk, seconded by Councilor Walker. Is there public comment on this item? If so, please approach the podium and provide your name and address. Seeing none, is there discussion by the council? The council ready for the question? Vote will be by show of hands. All in favor? Opposed? 7 having voted in the affirmative and none in the negative, the motion is adopted. The next item is Order 730506, 2024, appointing Emily F. Carrington as Register of Voters for the City of Auburn with a term expiration date of December 31, 2024. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Move.
Moved by Councilor Geary and
If
seconded by
she
Councilor
still
Mills.
wants to stay.
Any discussion by the council? Vote will be by show of hands. All in favor? Opposed? 7 having voted in the affirmative, none in the negative, the motion is adopted. The next item of business is the second open session of the night. Any member of the public that would like to speak to the council about any issue related to city business that's not on tonight's agenda, please approach the podium and provide your name and address. Seeing none, we'll close the open session and move on to reports. For the mayor's report, 3 items to report on. Councilor Whiting and I attended the AVCOG General Assembly with the manager since the last meeting. I think it was an excellent meeting. Phoenix McLaughlin, who is from Lewiston and actually is a member of the school board, he's the Director of Strategy Implementation at the Maine Department of Economic and Community Development, and I think he gave an excellent presentation regarding the economic outlook in the Androscoggin area. Last week, the manager and I attended the Androscoggin County Commissioners meeting to brief them on the informal discussions about 911 consolidation that's been going on. The manager and I have met several times with the mayor and acting city administrator in Lewiston, the sheriff in his role as the acting county administrator, and Commissioner Lewis to have some informal discussions about potential governance and funding models. We provided that information to the county commissioners on suggested governance structure and several potential funding models. We are awaiting some feedback from the commissioners, and once we get that, we'll schedule a work session with the council to go over the models and the feedback from the commissioners. And lastly, this past weekend, I represented the city at the inauguration of Gary Jenkins as the new president of Bates College. Very well attended event. I would say there was probably about 1,000 participants. Very nice ceremony. Councilors' reports. We'll start with Councilor Gary.
I'm going to defer to the Homeless Committee's chair.
Councilor Whiting.
Just to offer congratulations to all the award winners at the Central Maine Community College Foundation meeting last week.
Councilor Connell.
As a co-chair for the ad hoc committee on homelessness, there is a meeting coming up this Thursday. We're making continue to make some good progress, and look forward to providing you all updates in the near future.
Councilor Mills.
Yes, I have to correct a mistake that I made. When I was talking about the development on the gravel pit that is now no longer going to be done, it's still going to stay. We saved the gravel pit. But I commented that that the rain runoff, water runoff was going to be going into the storm runoff system. And in fact, what would have happened had we done the development and the city was getting $1 million to $2 million a year in revenue, what would happen is that would be contained in engineered runoff ponds and treated. So that instead of now running just into an open gravel pit, which will be now that we've saved the gravel pit, it's not running into the storm runoff. It will be on the sewer, and it would have been on the sewer, and it would have been city water, so it would have been revenue to the water department and the sewer department. But it's not, and it wasn't in the storm runoff, so I just needed to correct the record for that.
Councilor Wiseman.
Nothing.
Councilor Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tuesday, the 14th, Age Friendly has a meeting at 5:30 at the Senior Community Center. We'll be discussing things moving forward, and one of them things is Saturday, the 18th, 1 to 3 will be at the Auburn Library, and we will be giving away good clothing for the needy. We'll have over 10,000 pieces of clothing to give away. We'll be there as a committee setting up most of the day Friday. So Saturday, 1 to 3 on the 18th. So please, if you're in need of clothing of any kind, please come and check us out. Thank you.
Councilor Platt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let's do 2 quick updates. We heard about in the workshop today a couple updates from the Conservation Working Group. It's No Mow May, so for anybody who's looking to not mow their lawns and let pollinators live freely, but I believe Public Works has some posters, if they haven't been taken already, that are available to put on your lawns. And I also just wanted to bring some attention to 2 items passed on the consent agenda today, and that was the approval of Huda Aiden and Anaya Eggy from the Auburn school system. They're Edward Little High School students to the city council as student representatives. There are already student representatives on the school committee. I think it's either been a long time since they were on the city council or this is new. I'm not sure. It's new. So this is new. So these 2 candidates will be joining us, I believe. So it's 6:30. They start on 6:30, July 1st, whenever that meeting is after that.
I believe they're going to be joining us on the 20th.
Yeah.
The manager will speak to that. Anything further?
That is all.
Mr. Manager?
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Thank you, Councilor Platts, regarding the student representatives. So we are pleased. We moved in the previous council, actually 2 councils ago, to move that ordinance as it pertains to student representation. COVID came and that slowed everything. So it's nice that we're back on track. So we are looking forward to these two new students coming in. The mayor and I will do a orientation with the city clerk on Thursday, and then we will bring them in at our May 20th meeting for an official swearing in, and then they'll take their seats here at the council. And so we're real excited about having them join us. Also, very pleased that Emily is joining us officially as our city clerk, her first meeting. Lots of new faces, yes. So Kelsey will be presenting her first finance report as the new finance director. So a lot of new faces within the city in these roles, and so we're real excited about the changes that are underway. Council, a few meetings ago, you moved on the property at 46 Fair Street and gave a 90-day process for that. I've been in communication with the planning department. I just want to make sure I'm providing you with a 30-day update so that you're aware of what's taking place. So the owner has applied and has been approved for the permits that were necessary for the repairs. The portion of the structure that was unsound has been removed from that structure, and staff will continue to monitor and go out and inspect as needed. And there has been a crew that has been on site, regularly on site. They removed all the windows recently, and they actually brought new windows in. So there's a lot of work that is taking place. If you drive by, you'll see that work is underway. I'll provide you another 30-day update just to ensure that continues. Last item I have is related to Lobster Fest, which is this Saturday, from 1 to 6 at Festival Plaza. It's a free event. We really encourage the public to come out, and it should be a great time. Thank you.
Council Walker.
Thank you. I would like to know from the city manager, could you ask Jay to give us a report on St. Louis Church? I'd like to know where we stand with that.
Sure.
Anything further from the council? There's no executive sessions tonight. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Mayor? We do have the financial report.
I'm sorry.
It's her first one, but she would glad to get out of it.
Yeah. I saw you headed for the door. I apologize. Kelsey, go ahead with the
No, that's my nose running for the door. Sorry, I have a little stuffy. Try not to sniffle at you all. Excuse me, sorry. So this is my first finance report, and it is looking back to a time when the former finance director was here. So there are some additional tweaks that I'll be making over the next couple of months while I catch us up on those reports. So it's going to look slightly different as we move along, trying to make small changes rather than just throwing into a large change. So I'll be making those adjustments over the next couple of reports, and you'll see me at the next meeting with the February report. There were no significant period variances of note for this, January 31st ending. But of note, year to date, just wanted to point out some positives here. We had significantly higher investment returns compared to FY23. That's really worked in our favor. A former finance director did a really great job at finding some really good investments and rates for us. We are supposed to be around 58.3% for tracking purposes at the annual budget. In comparison to the annual budget, our total revenues are at 56.79%, and our total expenditures are at 53.09%. So we're right on track where we're supposed to be. Nothing of concern to note.
Are there questions for the finance director from the council? Not seeing any. Thank you very much. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? We'll adjourn.
Slip that in. I know. Thanks.